Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! The peaceful Sunday evening was shattered by the strident ringing of the telephone, its loud buzz in stark contrast to the warm family ambiance. The familiar glow of the caller ID revealed an unexpected name, Gwen, whose timing was odd, to say the least. The whole family knew she was on the cusp of her highly anticipated journey to Camp Willow, a summer escapade she had eagerly awaited. As the aroma of freshly prepared mashed potatoes filled the room, the question of who would answer the peculiar call hung in the air. With a swift movement, the eldest child rose, leaving the comfort of the dinner table to reach for the archaic landline, a testament to the family's commitment to tradition.
"I'll take it,"
he announced, his hand already on the receiver. The voice that met his ear was one of anguish, a stark contrast to the mirthful atmosphere of the dinner table.
"Who's this?"
he asked, uncertain.
"Cash, it's me, Gwen."
The voice on the other end wheezed between sobs.
"Something terrible."
His heart sank. This was not the jovial conversation he had expected from his friend.
"I fell. I was packing and the doctor says it's broken badly."
Her voice cracked.
"My leg. I need surgery tomorrow."
The dining room fell silent as everyone listened to his side of the conversation. When he hung up, all eyes were on him.
"Gwen broke her leg. She's at County General getting it set now. Dad, she wants you to bring her overnight bag. She says they're admitting her."
Mom's face crumpled. "Oh no. And she was so looking forward to Camp Willow. She worked all year to save up her portion of the fees." Dad grabbed his car keys.
"I'll head over now. What rotten timing. She's been talking about this camp for months. The deposit alone was nearly $1,000.
Mom sighed, staring down at her cooling dinner.
"Non-refundable too. I checked the paperwork when I signed her up."
Cash picked at his food, genuinely sorry for his 22-year-old sister. She'd been bouncing off the walls about this exclusive women's wilderness retreat since she'd been accepted. An all-female environment focused on personal growth, outdoor skills, and sisterhood. It had sounded perfect for her.
"What about her spot at camp?"
Cash asked, more out of curiosity than anything else. Mom sighed. "We'll just have to eat the cost. It's not like any of us could go in her place." Dad paused at the front door, keys dangling from his fingers. A thoughtful expression crossed his face as he turned back toward the dining room.
"Actually..."
3 pairs of eyes looked up at him.
"It's an interesting thought,"
Dad mused.
"The camp doesn't know what Gwen looks like. They just have her paperwork."
Mom's eyebrows shot up.
"Harold, what are you suggesting?"
Dad leaned against the doorframe.
"Cash is about Gwen's height and build. Maybe..." "No,"
Cash said immediately, realizing where this was headed.
"Absolutely not. Just think about it," Dad pressed. "It's a big investment down the drain otherwise."
Cash stared at his father in disbelief.
"You want me to pretend to be my sister? At an all-women's camp? Have you lost your mind?"
"Harold, that's ridiculous," Mom chimed in, but her tone lacked conviction. "Is it, though?" Dad set his keys on the entryway table and stepped back into the dining room.
"Cash is between jobs right now. He was just saying yesterday he needed a break from the city."
"A break, yeah. Not a gender swap vacation."
"Listen,"
Dad said, spreading his hands.
"I'm just throwing the idea out there. 3 weeks in the mountains, all expenses paid. Fresh air, hiking, swimming, just with a different name tag. Cash crossed his arms. And different clothes. And different everything.
Mom tapped her fork against her plate, considering. You two do look similar from a distance. Same blonde hair, same build.
Mom, I can't believe you're entertaining this.
Cash pushed his chair back from the table.
It would be a shame to waste all that money, she said quietly. You'd need to shave, of course, Dad added, as if they were discussing something perfectly reasonable. And we'd have to figure out what to do about your voice. I'm not doing this, Cash stated firmly. End of discussion. Dad shrugged. Fine. Just thought I'd mention it. He grabbed his keys again. I'm heading to the hospital.
After Dad left, Cash helped Mom clear the table, both working in silence. As he loaded the dishwasher, she leaned against the counter. You know, she said cautiously, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. Cash nearly dropped a plate. Mom, seriously? I'm just saying. It's 3 weeks. The camp is far enough away that no one would know you. And Gwen really was looking forward to the experience. So was I supposed to, what? Live in a cabin with a bunch of women? Shower with them? The cabins have private changing areas. I remember that from the brochure. Cash shook his head in disbelief. I can't believe we're still talking about this. Mom dried her hands on a dish towel. Just sleep on it, okay? For Gwen's sake. Later that night, Cash sat on the edge of his bed, phone in hand. His text conversation with Gwen glowed in the dark room. Sorry about your leg. How bad is it? 2 places. Surgery tomorrow. 8 weeks recovery minimum. I'm devastated about Camp Willow. Yeah, that sucks. Dad mentioned his crazy idea to me. Said you shut it down immediately. Of course I did. It's insane. Maybe, but also kind of hilarious. I mean, if you could pull it off. I couldn't. You're only slightly broader in the shoulders than me. My clothes would fit you. This conversation is over. Just think about it. Please. For me? For the $3,500 we'll lose otherwise? Cash tossed his phone aside and flopped backward onto his bed. The whole idea was absurd. And yet... The next evening found Cash sitting uncomfortably in Gwen's bedroom, surrounded by her packed luggage. Mom had brought most of it home from the hospital, while Gwen remained admitted for her surgery. I can't believe I'm even considering this, he muttered. Dad clapped him on the shoulder. It's just 3 weeks. Think of it as an acting challenge. Or a prison sentence, Cash grumbled. Mom was examining Gwen's summer wardrobe, laid out across the bed. These denim skirts will be comfortable and practical, and the striped tank tops are perfect for the weather. She held up a powder blue one-piece swimsuit. This might be tricky. Cash buried his face in his hands. I can't do this. Sure you can, Dad said confidently. We've got a day to practice. Your camp name is Valerie, right? Gwen's middle name. Easy to remember. The camp paperwork is already updated, Mom added. I called this morning and explained that you prefer to go by your middle name, but your legal name is on the forms. Cash's head snapped up. You did what? Before I even agreed? Just keeping our options open, honey. For the next hour, they worked through the basics, how to walk, talk, and carry himself as Valerie. Mom demonstrated a feminine gait while Dad recorded Cash's attempts on his phone, offering critical feedback that was more exasperating than helpful. Lower your voice a bit, Dad suggested. Not too deep. just softer. I'm trying, Cash hissed. And smaller steps. You're stomping. I'm not stomping. You kind of are, dear, Mom agreed. By evening, Cash had reluctantly tried on several of Gwen's outfits. The denim skirt felt strange against his legs, the striped tank top too tight across his chest. We'll need to do something about that, Mom murmured, eyeing his flat chest. Gwen left her padded bras. Cash closed his eyes.
This is a nightmare.
Just think of the mountains, Dad reminded him. The fishing, the hiking, the constant fear of being discovered and humiliated, Cash countered. Mom patted his arm. It's your choice, honey. But the bus leaves tomorrow at noon. Cash spent a restless night weighing his options. By morning, a combination of guilt over the wasted money, sympathy for Gwen, and a strange curiosity he couldn't quite explain led him to a decision he still couldn't believe he was making. Fine, he told his parents over breakfast. I'll do it, but if it goes badly, I'm leaving immediately. That's all we ask, Mom said, beaming. Now let's get you ready. We have 4 hours. Those 4 hours were a blur of last-minute preparations. Mom helped him shave his legs while Dad went to purchase a few items they'd need for the disguise. Cash practiced his Valerie voice until his throat was sore. When it was time to dress, he reluctantly stepped into a casual blue sundress and white sneakers. Simple is best for travel, Mom advised, helping him adjust the padded bra. The wig is good quality. Gwen used it for a costume party last Halloween. The blonde wig matched his natural hair color, but fell past his shoulders in loose waves. Once secured and styled, even Cash had to admit it looked surprisingly natural. Dad returned with makeup and watched as Mom applied it to Cash's face with practiced efficiency. Not too much, she explained. Natural look. You're going to a camp, not a nightclub. When she finished and held up a mirror, Cash stared at his reflection in shocked silence. The person looking back was somehow both himself and a stranger. His features softened, framed by the blonde waves, eyes enhanced, but not overdone.
Holy shit,
he whispered.
Language, Valerie,
Dad said with a smirk. The drive to the bus pickup point was tense. Cash, now fully dressed as Valerie, kept his eyes trained out the window, heart pounding every time they passed another vehicle. Remember, Mom said as they pulled into the parking lot where other young women were gathering. Just be yourself. Well, a version of yourself. Don't overthink it.
Easy for you to say,
Cash muttered in his practiced, softer voice. Dad parked away from the crowd. Call us if you need anything.
And remember, you're doing this for Gwen.
Cash nodded, unable to form words as panic set in. The reality of what he was about to do crashed over him like a wave. Mom squeezed his hand. You'll be fine. Just blend in and enjoy the experience. With trembling legs, he stepped out of the car. Dad handed him the 2 suitcases from the trunk. See you in 3 weeks, Val, Dad said loudly enough for nearby campers to hear. The weight of the luggage in his hands gave Cash something to focus on as he approached the growing group of women. A cheery camp counselor with a clipboard stood checking names. Name? She asked when it was his turn.
Valerie Mitchell,
he replied, voice carefully modulated. The counselor scanned her list. Mitchell, got you right here. Welcome to Camp Willow, Valerie. I'm Bethany, one of your lead counselors. She handed him a name tag and a packet. "Bus 3 is yours. Have your luggage loaded and find a seat. We leave in 15 minutes.
Thanks,
Cash managed, heart racing. Somehow he survived the luggage loading and found a window seat on the bus. As other women filtered in, he kept his eyes down, focused on the camp brochure in his hands. A woman with curly red hair plopped down beside him. "First time at Willow?" Cash nodded, not trusting his voice for more than necessary. "Me too. I'm Heather." She extended a hand.
"Valerie,"
he replied, shaking it briefly.
"You seem nervous."
"Just tired. Long drive here." Heather nodded sympathetically. "Well, 3 weeks in the mountains should fix that. I hear the place is gorgeous." As the bus pulled away, Cash stared out the window at his parents growing smaller in the distance. What had he gotten himself into? The journey to Camp Willow took nearly 3 hours, winding through progressively more remote mountain roads. By the time they arrived, Cash had managed to avoid any extended conversations, claiming a headache that wasn't entirely feigned. The camp itself was beautiful, a collection of rustic cabins nestled among tall pines, with a sparkling lake visible through the trees. As the campers disembarked, they were sorted into cabin groups. "Valerie Mitchell?" called a counselor with a clipboard. Cash raised his hand slightly. "Pine cabin, over there." She pointed to a structure near the water's edge. Dragging his suitcases, Cash followed the path to Pine cabin. Inside, 6 beds were arranged around the perimeter of a spacious room. As promised, a separate changing area was visible behind a partition, with individual shower stalls beyond it. The modest privacy was his only comfort. 3 women were already choosing beds. Cash selected one in the corner, furthest from the others.
"I'm Valerie,"
he said quietly when they looked his way. "Diana," said a tall woman with a friendly smile.
"Monica,"
offered another, already unpacking athletic gear.
"Jenna,"
said the third, barely looking up from her phone. Cash busied himself with unpacking, carefully arranging Gwen's clothes in the small dresser beside his bed. The denim skirts and striped tank tops that had seemed so ridiculous at home now represented his safest options. A bell rang outside, summoning everyone to the main lodge for orientation. Cash smoothed his blue sundress and followed his cabin mates, trying to mimic their easy, natural movements. The camp director, a commanding woman in her 50s named Helen, welcomed them warmly. "Ladies, this is your time. 3 weeks to connect with nature, challenge yourselves, and form bonds of friendship that may last a lifetime. At Camp Willow, we believe in empowering women through outdoor experiences and community." Cash listened attentively, focusing on maintaining his posture and keeping his knees together on the bench. Around him, 30 women of various ages nodded and smiled at the director's words. "Tomorrow, activities begin in earnest," Helen continued. "Tonight, get to know your cabin mates, settle in, and join us for the welcome campfire at 8. Back at the cabin, the other women chatted easily about their lives. Cash offered minimal information when pressed, sticking close to Gwen's real details, but keeping things vague.
"I work in retail,"
he said, when asked, which was true enough for Gwen.
"Needed a break from everything."
The others nodded understandingly. No one pushed for more. That evening at the campfire, Cash sat quietly on a log, watching sparks rise into the darkening sky. Women laughed and sang around him, sharing stories and s'mores. Despite his anxiety, there was something peaceful about being here, away from the pressures and expectations of his regular life. No one was competing with him. No one was challenging him to prove himself. He was just present, accepted without question. The first real test came the following morning, changing clothes. Cash woke earlier than his cabin mates and slipped into the changing area with his clothes. He quickly switched from his sleep shirt and shorts into a denim skirt and blue striped tank top, adjusting his wig and applying minimal makeup as Mom had taught him. When he emerged, 2 of his cabin mates were awake. "Early riser?" Diana asked with a yawn. Cash nodded. "Always have been." "Wish I had your discipline." Monica chuckled, stretching in her bunk. Breakfast in the dining hall was chaotic and loud. Cash found a seat at a half-empty table and picked at his food, still adapting to the feeling of the padded bra and the way the skirt settled around his legs when he sat. A counselor circulated with activity sign-up sheets. Cash scanned the options: archery, hiking, swimming, crafts, canoeing, rock climbing. He chose archery for the morning and hiking for the afternoon, activities that seemed least likely to compromise his disguise. At the archery range, Cash discovered an unexpected advantage. While he'd never formally trained, years of hunting with his father had given him a good eye and steady hand. The bow was different from what he was used to, but the principles were the same. "Wow, Valerie's a natural," called the instructor after his third bullseye. Several women clapped appreciatively. Cash felt a strange flush of pride, different from the competitive satisfaction he usually experienced when besting others. This felt purer somehow. "Have you done this before?" asked a woman named Rachel. "A little," Cash admitted, "but not in this setting." "Well, you're amazing at it." The compliment lingered pleasantly as they continued practicing. By session's end, several women had asked Cash for pointers, which he provided carefully, mindful of his voice and mannerisms. The afternoon hiking expedition took them along a ridge overlooking the valley. Cash found himself genuinely enjoying the experience. Without the usual male posturing he'd grown accustomed to on group hikes, the focus was simply on the journey and the magnificent views. No one was racing ahead to prove their stamina or making lewd comments when women removed layers in the heat. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Diana had fallen into step beside him on the trail. Cash nodded, taking in the panoramic vista. "I've never seen anything quite like it." "Me neither. I'm usually too busy at work to take vacations like this." "What do you do?" Cash asked, finding it easier to deflect attention by asking questions. "Corporate law. Soul-crushing but pays the bills." She laughed. "This is my reset button. 3 weeks of no suits, no heels, no boardrooms." Cash smiled. "Sounds like you needed this." "We all did." Diana gestured to the women stretching along the trail. "Everyone here is escaping something." The observation stuck with Cash as they continued their hike. What was he escaping? His lack of direction after quitting his last job? The perpetual feeling of not measuring up to his father's expectations? Or something deeper he'd never allowed himself to examine? By the end of the first week, Cash had settled into a routine that felt surprisingly comfortable. The morning dash to the changing area, the careful application of makeup, the selection of appropriate outfits, all had become almost second nature. His cabin mates had accepted him completely, and he'd even formed tentative friendships with several women from other cabins. Archery had become his specialty. The instructor had asked him to help demonstrate techniques for beginners, a role he embraced with unexpected enthusiasm. There was something deeply satisfying about helping others succeed without the pressure of competition. The second Saturday marked the halfway point of camp, celebrated with a special dinner and a midsummer bonfire. Cash stood before the small mirror in the changing area, deliberating over which outfit to wear. "Wear the coral sundress," Diana suggested, popping her head around the partition. "It'll look great with your blonde hair." Cash started, hand flying to his chest. "You scared me." "Sorry," she grinned. "So, the coral dress?" He glanced at the garment in question, a flowing sundress in a soft coral color that he'd been avoiding as too overtly feminine compared to the denim skirts and tanks he'd been living in. "I don't know." "Trust me," Diana insisted. "It'll be perfect for tonight." With reluctant curiosity, Cash slipped into the dress after Diana left. The soft fabric settled around him differently than anything he'd worn so far. When he looked in the mirror, he barely recognized himself. The color brought warmth to his face, and the cut accentuated the artificial curves provided by the padded bra. For a moment, he stood transfixed by his reflection. There was something about this image that felt right in a way he couldn't articulate. At the bonfire, several women complimented his outfit. Cash thanked them genuinely, no longer feeling the need to keep his responses clipped and minimal. He found himself laughing with the others, sharing stories, carefully edited, but emotionally true, and even joining in when they began to sing. "You look happy," Diana observed as they toasted marshmallows side by side. Cash considered this. "I am. Happier than I've been in a long time."
Willow has that effect on people. Something about leaving everything behind and just being. "Yeah," Cash agreed softly. "Just being." Later that night, as he carefully hung the coral dress in his small closet space, Cash realized it had become his favorite item in the borrowed wardrobe. The realization should have disturbed him, but instead, it felt like acknowledging a simple truth. The final week of camp arrived with a mix of advanced activities and reflective sessions. Cash excelled in the former and found unexpected value in the latter. During a journaling exercise by the lake, he wrote honestly about the freedom he'd discovered at Camp Willow, the liberation from expectations, the joy of simply existing in a space without the constant need to prove his masculinity. He wrote about the acceptance he'd found, the friendships he'd formed, and the person he'd become over these 3 weeks. He carefully avoided any explicit mention of his deception, framing his thoughts in terms that could apply to anyone finding a new version of themselves. On the last full day of camp, Helen announced a special closing ceremony. "Tonight, each of you will have the opportunity to share what Willow has meant to you and what you'll take back to your everyday lives." Cash felt a pang of anxiety. How could he articulate what this experience had truly meant without revealing his secret? That afternoon, while others were busy with their final activities, Cash found himself drawn to Helen's office. The impulse to confess had been growing stronger as the end approached. Before he could reconsider, he knocked on her door. "Come in," called Helen's warm voice. Cash entered, coral dress swishing around his knees. "Do you have a minute?" "Of course, Valerie. What can I do for you?" Taking a deep breath, Cash closed the door behind him and sat in the chair across from her desk. "I need to tell you something about who I really am." Helen's expression remained neutral. "I'm listening." "My name isn't Valerie. It's Cash. Cash Mitchell." The words tumbled out in his natural voice. "Valerie is my sister's middle name. She broke her leg the day before camp started, and my parents convinced me to come in her place because the deposit was non-refundable." He expected shock,
anger, or disgust. Instead, Helen studied him thoughtfully. "I see," she said after a moment. "And how has this experience been for you, Cash?" The question caught him off guard. It's been transformative. I came here thinking it was a ridiculous charade, but... But? Helen prompted gently. But I've never felt more myself than I have these past weeks. Being Valerie, it's freed me from so many constraints I didn't even know were suffocating me. He gestured to his appearance. This started as a disguise, but it doesn't feel like one anymore. Helen nodded. That's not uncommon. Many people discover aspects of themselves when given the opportunity to step outside social expectations. You're not angry? Should I be? You haven't disrupted the camp. By all accounts, Valerie has been a model camper, helpful and engaged. She leaned forward. The question is, what does this mean for you going forward? Cash stared at his hands, folded in his lap.
I don't know.
The thought of going back to being Cash full-time, it doesn't feel right anymore. There are resources I can connect you with, Helen offered. People who can help you explore these feelings and decide what path is authentic for you. Tears welled in Cash's eyes, unexpected and uncontrollable. I don't think I want to stop being Valerie when I leave here. Helen reached across the desk and squeezed his hand. Then perhaps you don't have to. The closing ceremony that evening was held under the stars by the lake's edge. One by one, women stood to share what Camp Willow had given them: courage, peace, friendship, self-discovery. When it was Cash's turn, he stood gracefully, coral dress catching the firelight. 3 weeks ago, I arrived at Camp Willow feeling lost and confined by expectations I didn't even realize I was trying to meet. Here, I've discovered a version of myself that feels authentic in a way I never experienced before. His voice remained in the softer register he'd practiced, but the emotion behind the words was entirely genuine. I'm taking home more than memories and new skills. I'm taking home the permission to be truly myself.
And for that, I'll be forever grateful to all of you, and to this place.
The applause that followed wrapped around him like an embrace. Diana caught his eye across the fire and smiled warmly, as if she understood more than he'd said. The bus ride back to civilization the next day was bittersweet. Cash exchanged contact information with his new friends, promising to stay in touch. Will you come back next summer? Diana asked as they approached the pickup point where parents waited. Cash nodded, the decision crystallizing in that moment. Yes, I'll definitely be back. His parents' car was parked at the edge of the lot. As the bus pulled in, Cash could see them waiting anxiously, scanning the windows for a glimpse of him. Diana gave him a quick hug before disembarking.
Keep in touch, Valerie. I mean it.
I will, Cash promised. Stepping off the bus, suitcases in hand, he walked toward his parents. They stared as he approached, taking in the confident stride, the coral sundress, the comfortable posture of someone entirely at ease in their skin. With a swift movement, the eldest child rose, leaving the comfort of the dinner table to reach for the archaic landline, a testament to the family's commitment to tradition.
I'll take it,
he announced, his hand already on the receiver. The voice that met his ear was one of anguish, a stark contrast to the mirthful atmosphere of the dinner table. Mom's voice was uncertain.
It's Valerie now,
he replied softly but firmly.
And we have a lot to talk about.
Dad's expression cycled through confusion, surprise, and then a cautious acceptance. Well, you look happy. I am, Valerie said, feeling the truth of it deep in her bones. For the first time in my life, I really am. Mom reached out and touched the blonde hair, now familiar against Valerie's shoulders. Your sister will be surprised. So was I, Valerie admitted with a small laugh. But sometimes the most unexpected journeys take us exactly where we need to be. As they loaded the suitcases into the car, Valerie took one last look at Camp Willow's bus, at the women waving from windows, at the place that had changed everything. The coral sundress caught the summer breeze as she turned back to her parents. Let's go home, she said. I have a whole new life waiting to begin. Thanks for watching, my girlies. Be sure to check out Patreon for more.